Okay, welcome everyone. Good to see you. A few familiar faces. Hello. And okay, let's just get centered and grounded first. So just take a deep breath. Your feet on the floor. And bring your attention to your body sensations. And just notice what's happening in your body, in your physiology, in your muscles. If you have to move gently to shake out any tensions that you don't need, you can do that now. And for the hour and a half, before we go into Q&A, let yourself be open to the possibility that some shift or change is available for you. We're going to be covering ancestral healing, familial healing, a very kind of different way to look at goals and outcomes, and other things that might come up. All right. So arriving, present, grounded, still. Just gently open your eyes. Still people arriving. Okay, so I'll just do a little summary from the last couple of sessions. So in session one, and the recording for session two will be up shortly. I had it on gallery view, so I need to do some trimming. I think everyone here is okay with seeing their beautiful faces on recordings, but I thought I'd do that. So just to let you know, this is, it's a public training. The recordings is going to be available to people in the future. So if you do only share what you want to share. The amazing thing about this kind of work is that, as you've probably seen a couple of times already, is that content is not quite necessary. It's not necessary, right? You don't have to reveal our stories. The minute you know that you have a certain physiological response to the moment, then that is what we work on directly, right? And it's a kind of fast access route to being able to get transformation and change across multiple patterns simultaneously. So on Monday, we went through kind of stage development and the importance of looking at the fact that as we move through life, right, we evolve from stage to stage. And if everything goes right at each stage, then we complete the developmental tasks of that particular age. So from, Piaget's stages, which he was a child developmental psychologist. He had like a 2 to 3 years old, then about 4 to 5, 6, 7, and then into kind of preteen, and then into teenage, what he called formal operational, the ability to manipulate ideas, thoughts, concepts which arise. Now, if something has not been met or dealt with at a younger stage of development, it kind of binds our energy. It takes up a little bit of our essence or our consciousness, and it's like an app running in the background that's still running, right? That once we can resolve those, we reclaim that energy and we can repurpose it for our own functions in life, right? Now, who here was born? Everyone. Okay, good. Who here was born into a family, right? And was brought up by humans, right? No one here was brought up by wolves or by bears, or by salmon. Right, good. Now, the job of parents is to program us from the day we're born so that we are functional members of society. Unfortunately, they also program in their limits, their faulty assumptions, and not faulty assumptions, limited assumptions for what is possible as a human being. And throughout history, models like spiral dynamics kind of demonstrate that as human beings have evolved through history, at one point, democracies didn't exist, right? So as soon as we figured out that if everyone plays along to a certain set of rules, then we don't need to limit ourselves to a tribe of 100, 150 people, right? We can actually be in cities, towns and cities of thousands of people, and everyone functions, so long as everyone functions reasonably according to the rules, right? And then beyond that, you get kind of the ones, entrepreneurship, the people who want to play with the rules and go, hang on a minute, these rules aren't the limits, we can go beyond these. And so it goes on. So the first session was really very psychological. I also introduced some emotional regulation techniques, tools and techniques. So the TACPAS acupressure technique, havening, which is one of many psychosensory methods, a couple of others, which are on the recording. The last session, who here was at session 2? I see a few familiar faces, right? So we kind of went a little bit more deeply into energetics, right? So I want to show you a model from a woman called Terry O'Fallon. And all these different developmental psychologists actually, they did all their research independently, and you can kind of put all of their different models next to each other and they kind of nicely, neatly line up. You actually get a fair amount of consistency between different models. So can you see that okay? Let's have a look. Can you see that okay? Okay, so lots of different models, too much data on one slide, we know, for all those who do use PowerPoint, right? So I want to focus on this particular woman, Terry O'Fallon, who made probably the most complete or the most complicated model of all of them. However, she basically said there's 3 stages. One is the concrete, which is when we're in the physical world. So children play with physical objects, they can manipulate physical objects, and that's their world, right? And we're learning how the outside world works off our internal models of experience. Then we move into the subtle realms, and we're able to manipulate more subtle ideas, and then into more, for want of a better word, spiritual realms, what's called the meta-aware tier. So we start to get into these ideas of awareness, and those kinds of things. So in this middle realm, subtle realm, is a whole bunch of models to do with energetics, subtle energies. So chi and prana, aura, chakras, meridians, thought forms. It's a whole realm of the kind of mental world, the imagination world, you might call it, right? And for the most part, this is where we live, right? We don't interact with the world directly. We make maps and models in our experience of reality, and then we live through those. And most people would say they know the difference between imagination and reality, because if you don't, then that's technically you're, got more serious issues. That's, causes, that is insanity, essentially, right? So some part of our brain does know the difference, if we're normally functioning human beings, the difference between imagination and reality. The challenge is that some part of our meaning making hasn't been let into that information, and therefore is still acting as if when you have an imagination of a fear or a worry or a concern about the future that hasn't happened yet, it's almost like we're animating it and acting as if it's happening now and it's real, even though it's not real. So the process of waking up is coming out of these kind of trance states of believing in things that are fears, concerns, worries, limiting beliefs, constructions that are imagined, essentially. Come on, more people coming in. I just want to check. Is that making sense to people? Stop share. Yes, all good? Clear? Right. Now, the reason we animate these imaginations from our history, from our kind of fears, concerns, worries, irrational thinking, is because at one time it was functional and it was the best we could do. And we made those meanings, and it's almost like that little pocket of consciousness or that app is still running that belief or that experience, and it's taking up a little bit of our energy. And where do we model these from? From our family of origin. We saw our parents doing and thinking in certain ways, And we either just took that on and then just assumed that was the world, or we rebelled against it and we went, I'm not going to be like that. But weirdly, if you're, I'm not going to be like that, you're still subtly in opposition to that thought, right? How many people are still struggling with their limiting conditioning from their parents, their society, from how they grow up, all those things. So we're going to look at how to use some processes to surrender, release those kinds of things. And fear, because when we're quite young, the constructions of mind we can make is that I'm either in the tribe or out of the tribe. It's very black and white. It's like I have to belong or I don't belong, rather than much more complexity and nuance as we get older of, well, you can choose how to relate and what aspects of your upbringing were amazing and fantastic. You know, how many people here can think of the incredible qualities that they got from their, and values that they got from their parents, from society, from, you know, uncles, aunts, you know, schools, institutions, teachers, all those things. And what we want to release is the conditioning that feels limiting, basically. The conditioning where it feels like for you to be fully you, most people, what they try and do is fight against their conditioning, right? We don't want to do that. We want to recognize that when we think about our conditioning, it creates a body-mind state, right? And then we're the one making that. So it doesn't make sense to fight it, right? So if we can step back and realize that we are moment to moment using this nervous system, this consciousness, to construct the experience of our existence, the very map making, meaning making of the reality we're having, that is a key waking up moment, right? And we can know it in theory. And what happens is progressively more and more and more of us gets it, right? How many people can remember a time when we used to get caught up in something and now it's just not an issue. It's just not a thing anymore, right? You've literally woken up out of that trance of that experience. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing today. So also in the second session, what we looked at was we moved through what's called the 7 planes meditation. And the basic idea is that when you are in a certain experience, so what we did in that, you'll see on the recording, but what we did in that experience was we moved through a map of states of consciousness into very lofty, what might be called states, which is really just a function of our nervous system, right? So if you ignore the content, you have the capacity to be, within a very short period of time, that meditation was about 20 minutes, in a much more spacious, expansive, free state, right? And so I like to think of this training as skill, as education. You know, like when you get physically fit, you get better at it, you do it and you get better at it. And the same is your capacity with states of consciousness. It's a skill and a talent that you can develop, right, as you practice. Right. And what we did was we moved by moving into a very spacious, expansive, very free and light state. It allows you then to bring up challenges, problems, and issues without getting caught up in it. Right. So every time you have a thought of something in the past, it reanimates in this moment, right? And so there's 2 ways to do that. One is you can think about something and it doesn't have much affect or emotional response, right? So you can think about it very objectively. Other things you think about or bring up can trigger a huge response in the body-mind system. And so what we're learning to do is the capacity to deliberately disidentify, to be able to think anything, really, because the human mind is unlimited, really, in that way. Without being limited by having a negative feeling that we then have to rile against or rattle against. And this is where this emotional regulation tools come in, right? To be able to quickly and easily release old holding patterns and attachments, right? And as we do this, we get freer and lighter, and life becomes more fun and enjoyable. And the trick to it, and it sounds a bit paradoxical, is basically not to believe the narrative. So the stories that our minds tell are useful to the extent that we can navigate the world with them, but they are not true in any absolute sense. And the reason we know that is because someone else has a different view, and their view can be equally valid, right? Even however much we think, no, they're wrong, they shouldn't be thinking that way. How could they, right? Okay, so, and then today we're going to also go into goals as well and look a little bit about goals and taking action. How many people, you know the actions you want to be taking, and for some reason you're just not doing them, right? This is a big one, right? So we're going to really go into that one and tackle that one today. All right, so let's start with the family of origin. So there's two elements to this. One is that Bert Hellinger, who was a family constellation therapist, suggested that we have something called suffering obligations of love. And the idea is that when we're young, the way we show our love is to be like someone else. So in the tribe, right? And difference when, you know, and still when people get to full adulthood, that, you know, people are in that kind of them and us tribe type thing, the belongingness comes from a difference from other, right? Comes from I'm in this tribe. And that can be coded as love, that acceptance, that belonging of you belong in this tribe, you belong in this family, you belong in this society. Right? Now, as we start to shift and change, especially if our families of origin and the way we're conditioned and brought up has limitations, then those can start to get in the way. So I have a friend, I haven't seen her for a while, and she was a web designer, and she lived in West Virginia in a small town. And because mentally for her, earning $60 an hour kind of fit, you know, that was like a big number for the kind of environment, the area she was in. And there's kind of a certain amount of shame about earning more than that. She was doing web development for a company that could comfortably pay her way more than that, right? And so her very way of thinking linked to her identity, which is I'm a hired help, and I go in and someone tells me what to do, employee, and then I just do it, right? But what was actually starting to happen is the very structure of how she put their website together was starting to define how they ran their business. She was basically a strategy consultant being paid $60 an hour, right? And as we talked about raising her rates, she started to get these internal sense of fear, and I won't belong you know, no one would know, right? But these kinds of things can be running. And so what we want to do is start to move like we started to do in the last session, move our imagination into where we want to be, start to kind of bring to mind the outcome that you're looking for, and then notice, because you don't have to go investigating with kind of thoughts, notice what happens in your body, mind, energy system, right? Do you get some kind of fear, resistance, reluctance, pulling back, any kind of reaction that is a signal that some part of your psyche is has fears, concerns, worries, is not in alignment with the outcomes you're trying to take. Most people, what they do is they suppress those feelings and they try and override it. And what's worse is they say that those feelings they're having, that resistance, is the world, right? That they'll code the world as difficult and hard, and it's challenging out there. So the example I gave in the last session was my juicer, masticating juicer. I thought, it takes like, 3, 4, 5 minutes to clean it. When I actually measured the time of it, it only took 23 seconds. And I realized what I was measuring when I was measuring 3, 4, 5 minutes was actually my feeling sense of how much reluctance I had and not wanting to do it, right? And when I actually realized how easy it is when you decouple all of the, I don't want to do it, this is horrible, this is difficult, I don't like it, all of that stuff, and you actually start to clean up all of that stuff, you can look at the tasks and the actions you want to take in your life and see what they actually take. Someone said to me in one of the classes, said, do a landing page for a website. or I think it was to work out her customer avatar. And she said, oh, it'll take about a month, right? And what she was measuring is how much she didn't want to do it, right? And actually, when we kind of got down to it, she said it'll probably take about an afternoon, right? So everyone will have this experience. How many had a term paper to do, right? So you had 8 weeks or 12 weeks to do it, right? But you actually did it in the last 4 days. So it is a 4-day assignment. It's not a 2-month assignment, right? So it's these kind of misunderstandings or miscodings where we think about our tasks and challenges in life, and then we add a whole bunch of other meanings that make it so much more challenging. So what we're going to do today is start to release those in the second half. All right. So put your feet on the floor just for a minute and just tune in. And consider how you know, it's a little bit of a strange question, that you have a self. And what I mean by that is, as soon as I said that, what happened with your attention? Did it go to a thought? Did it go to a body sensation? Yeah, what happened in the microsecond after I said, how do you know you have a self? And as you do that, just without resisting it or making any meanings or judgments, just feel that sense of having a self. I like to call it a shape. It's a way of having your physiology, how your breathing is. For the physicists amongst us, it's the superposition, the overlap of every meaning you've ever made, all with different values trying to compete to show up in your body, mind, energy system right now as you experience. It's like every thought, every perspective you've ever had that you're still identified with, laying its tiny bit of claim over animating your body, mind, energy system, your muscles, your breathing, your thoughts. And without trying to do anything with it, just attend to it. And now get curious. Just, a number, a percentage might spring to mind. How much of that is from your family of origin, your parents, mum and dad, that you just learned just by modeling, by seeing and imitating, which is how children learn. And don't try and do anything with it, but just breathe and relax and notice. Notice that if you don't fight with it, but if you're just curious and interested, that some of it turns up and then starts to drop away. And when you relax this contraction or attachment, it doesn't mean you lose the thing. It actually means you gain choice. So you can be that way and you don't have to. You have it now rather than it has you. Bring to mind what you have in common with your clan, with the people you hang out with, as a felt sense of what connects and binds you. And notice that if you relax and loosen that binding, what it brings is fluidity and choice. And you can still interact with those people, sometimes even better than you ever have. Get a sense of the felt sense of your commonality, of the tribes and the groups that you spend your time with. See if you can expand your awareness to include not just yourself, but that network of connections, because that's as much you as the you that you think is having those connections right now. And then just giving yourself permission, anything that's ready to resolve, things that are old, out of date. And close those, maybe even chapters, while still retaining access to all of the experience and the learning from those times. Recalling and reclaiming your energy. So you have it to be able to dispatch in the future in the ways that you want. Feel your center line up and down your spine. You can organize yourself around your alignment with yourself. And then bring your attention to your DNA, your genetic lineage. And just relax around it and attend. And anywhere where you've attempted to use your energy to heal the transgressions of the past. Other generations, other times. As I said before, you cannot be wrong about your subjective experience. So whatever is arising, you can be with it, breathe, relax, release. And maybe you have some gratitude for the lineage, for the gifts that have been handed down. Some people have physical strength, some people have psychic abilities, or whatever you want to call it. Some people have intelligence, heart, whatever your gifts are that have been handed down through your lineage. You can give yourself permission for those to flourish. And then very gently, open your eyes Coming on back. And feel yourself here. Just take a breath. As I mentioned before, when we use altered states like this, one of the important pieces is the generalization into our everyday lives. So when people go off on, extreme trainings, is they go into a very altered state. And when they come back to their normal environment, it's almost like, the state dependent learning. So, they leave the learnings behind. So just for this moment, just imagine what you've just done to generalize out into all areas of your life where it would be useful. Consider times and places, actions, thoughts, people, feelings, events. That can be informed by this new perspective. And when you're ready, open your eyes, wiggle your fingers and toes, have a stretch if you want. Okay, and then put in the chat how that was, what happened. And if you want to raise your hand and say a couple of words, you can do that too. Say a couple of sentences. How was that? Relaxing and freeing. Lovely, calming, centering, liberating. And quite an experience. I like the DNA moment. Remember what I said, if you were there, remember what I said on day one is that what's happening in terms of brainwave states is that we're taking this, I think it's 2 or 3 pounds of grey matter. That's kind of like a holographic computer. You might think of it if you know what, I'm making it up. I don't think you can buy a holographic computer, but we have one in our heads. And what that means is that when we put our body, mind, brain states into a certain configuration, that is the access point to those thoughts, feelings, memories. Right. So my next door neighbor has a 16-year-old, and she's older now. But when she was studying, she would study lying on her bed, feet in the air, headphones on, right? And her dad said, and it's quite wise, he said, that state is where the learning is happening, right? That's a very different state than if you're sitting at a desk with pen in hand in the quiet with other people around, right? And so what he got her to do was to practice closer to the state in which she wanted to have those skills and that learning, right? So how many people have done this? You walk out of the room, and this probably happens as you get a bit older. You walk out of the room and you go, what was it? What was it? I know I wanted to remember something. And you walk back in the room, and when you walk back in the room, that thought pops back in the mind, right? So what we're doing with these meditations is we're moving in and out of alpha and theta states, which are brainwave states that we had when we were younger. And there's what it creates in the mind is coherence across our brains. So if you actually look at brainwave kind of EEGs, you get much slower waves that kind of go all the way across the brain, right? So it creates integration. And actually we know that if you deny people delta, like slow brainwave states for sleep for anything more than 2 or 3 days, it really messes people up, right? So getting that kind of deep restful sleep is incredibly important, right? So, all right. So I like the phrase Nan used about live to flourish. Absolutely. Come, but didn't feel much. Yeah. So with this, so what's happening here as well, this is a leap of faith, is that in this model, the energetic realm, there are such things as thought forms, right? And you might think of thought forms as, let's assume that this universe is one giant information system, like a big hard drive, and most of us only have access to our own little bit of it till we realize we can actually have access to all of it, which is all in Star Wars Episode 2, Season 2, or whatever. Yeah. What was that? It was actually Episode 6, I think. Anyway, or 5. So thought forms is the idea that we can be that they almost have a life of their own, but they can't live unless we animate them, right? So this idea of, you probably see at school one particular phrase and it kind of spreads across the whole school, or means in society, right? So you can almost think of a human being as the container that has the ability to animate and live different thought forms, right? Now, the question is, though, are those the ones that we want to be living, right? And I only have to say one word, right? And I could activate a whole bunch of thoughts, feelings, emotions, reactions. I'm thinking which one to do, actually. All right, so let's use one that's nearly finished, nearly in history. All right, so I only have to say the word Trump, right? And people get either huge laughter or a whole bunch of physiology and reactions and responses. I won't use the most recent word, but you probably guess what it is. Begins with V. And so the question is then, are we having our own thoughts? And has anyone ever got lost down a YouTube or a Facebook channel, right? Especially the Facebook channels where people are fighting and arguing, right? If you've ever felt that kind of, there's a pull or I feel compelled, I have to write something, right? You're getting sucked in to a vortex or a thought field, essentially, right? And the question is, you can only ever get dragged in if there's something in you that's kind of hooky, right? Hooking into that, right? Now, the more conscious you get, the more subtle these become, and the more easily you can choose whether or not you engage down a certain road or not. Has anyone been in an argument with someone and they just can't leave? Right? They know that they should just exit, right? But they're still there, right? That feeling, that hooking feeling, the compulsion feeling, is kind of that feeling getting caught up. All right, so let's do an EFT round on that now that we know what we're talking about. All right, so tap. So you just follow along, and I'll give you space to say these words. Notice how you're feeling right now. All right, just tune into your body mind state, and tap on the side of your hand like this, just where that fleshy bit is, and then repeat these words to yourself. I'll leave a gap. Even though I get hooked into things sometimes, it's almost like I'm compelled, even though I don't want to. And I love, honor, and accept myself anyway. Okay. Where the eyebrow meets the bridge of the nose, these hooky feelings, it's like I get pulled in. I'm doing the thing before I didn't even know that I'm doing it. My body is being animated by these thoughts before I got a say in the matter. I choose to take my power back, not by fighting with these things, but by feeling them fully and tapping and releasing them. Deep breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, now, how come we didn't work on anything specific, right? And here's why, is because if you actually look at the set of animating behaviors and responses that human beings have, there's not a huge number of them, right? There are patterns. And so when we kind of do coaching and therapy, the temptation is to go for you know, one challenge, then another challenge, then another challenge, and another challenge. And this can take a very long time. But actually, the way we approach getting stressed, getting frustrated, getting annoyed, getting unhappy we only use one or two different strategies for some of these things. We have decisions is a good example, right? Some people make all their decisions the same way. So if they're in the Chinese restaurant and there's 20 pages to look through, some people just go down and the first thing they get to that they like, they go, yep, got it, fantastic. I'm having that. Other people have to go through the entire menu, right, to check that they're not missing out on something. Now, consider if that person is using that strategy for dating, right, or finding a secretary or things. It's a really bad strategy, especially for dating, right? Now, so what we find is that human beings operate by patterns. So the way you get hooked by one thing will have pretty much most of the time the same physiological response and animating change in your body as all the other things, right? And it'll be big chunks. And I like to think of it like this. How many doors do you know how to open? What do you reckon? Put in the chat, how many doors do you know how to open? I know it's a silly question. 5 or 6. Yes, any that's unlocked. 55. Any. Yeah, exactly. So that are not locked. Actually, a lot of them are not locked, but they are push doors, and we're pulling on them frantically, trying to get out. The point is that you can open thousands of doors, but you only need to know how to open a door that opens inwards, a door that opens outwards, a sliding door, a revolving door, you know, maybe a couple of others, you know. And because once you've got 5 or 6 kind of patterns, you can open thousands and thousands of doors. If you've never seen a door before, you probably pretty much figure it out fairly quickly as you cycle through your 3 or 4 approaches. We're a bit like this with our problems, right? That people think they've got endless challenges, but they often haven't. They've got 1 or 2 that has a very specific physiology connection to it. And when we use these tools to release those physiological patterns and we target and hone what we're doing, right, we can get actually quite generalized changes and shifts over a relatively short period of time, right? Now, the thing about programming and conditioning is some programming and conditioning stops us undoing the programming and conditioning. How many people had parents who said, just do what I say, don't question me, right? Right, exactly, right. So now we're adults, we've got to go through, be able to have the feeling that comes up when we question anything that's lurking in our space that pretends to be an authority. Okay, so let's just do a round on that. So tap on the side of your hand. Even though parts of me submits to authority, I love, honor, and accept myself anyway. These authorities that I modeled from the world, now I simulate them and run them in me. They're not real, but feelings come up when I challenge them. Imagine challenging that authority now. Imagine challenging that authority now. Keep breathing. I choose to challenge this authority, maybe even channel it. And feel the feeling that comes up when I think about challenging authority. I choose to release this now. Deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Right. And put in the chat, how are you feeling? Yeah, yawning is good. How many people are feeling lighter and freer? Right. So here's what I'm doing. right? I'm going through my best assessment of what the strongest pattern that's in the field that's available for transformation right now. And then the next one shows up, and the next one, and it's a bit like, you know, the dinner plates at the canteen, where you take one off and the next one pops up, take one off, the next one pops. Eventually there's less and less, and it's lighter and lighter, and then the last one pops off, and then there's no more left, and then you can do what you want. So, all right, empowered to make my own choices. Excellent. Very relaxed and happy. Yes, light, calm, and serene. These exercises are tiring. Yeah, so if you're feeling tired, drink a little bit of water, have a little move around, because what happens when we shift at these kinds of levels is your brain starts to go into, okay, we need to rewire this. You've just had new input. Has anyone been on like a new day of holiday, and there's all this new input that's coming in, and so at the end of the day you're like, I'm exhausted, I need to go to sleep, right? Or the other experience people have is if they've been skiing all day and they lie in bed, and their body mind energy just suddenly animates as if they're still on the slope skiing, and you have a look, you know, a twitch, that kind of thing. All right, so just having a little check in. All right, so I want to run through, and this is the power of a group actually, which is I'm going to play you a meditation. It's about 10 minutes or so. I think it's 11 minutes, and it's got a bit of music to it, so it's kind of a little bit trancey, and really kind of go with it. And when you hear the words, animate the words and consider what they mean, and what they bring up for you. So allow the words to activate the experience. And I'll tell you what it is. It's transgenerational healing, and it takes you through your mother's line, your father's line. And just, if any emotions come up, let those go and release. And we'll see how things are on the other side of it. Okay, so this is the risky bit, where the sound sharing works. And the stream audio capture. Okay. Open with. There we go. Okay. Share sound. As it gets going, you can close your eyes and let's just check it works. I'll start it and just give me a thumbs up if it's working. Take a deep breath and close your eyes. And just notice your center line, so that your head is sat square upon your shoulders. And before we even do anything, just like we saw earlier, a lot of things are ready to leave and to go. So give permission for anything that is ready to be dropped, let go of, released. Thank it for being there, let it leave your energy space. And then any spaces that are formed, call back your own energy. So it can be, what does it feel like when you just feel like you? Not imposed upon, not impinged upon, none of those things, just you being you, light, free, at ease. And then I want you to pay attention to your father's line first. And if you want to do it as a visual, just have sort of a family tree pop up with your father and then his mother and father and their siblings, and just trust your unconscious that any of those that show up in different ways. So in my mind, one of them shows up a little bit dark, so I just bring attention and awareness to that, and it loosens and softens and releases, and then goes back from dark to a kind of clear colour. Notice any body sensations that come up when you attend to your father's line. Going back one generation to your father's siblings, then 2 generations to your grandparents on that side, and then 3 generations, saying that we're in April 2021 now, so any of the programming you might have received or any of the traumas that they went through, just an intention that you choose to intend for them to heal, resolve, and recognize that it's over now. As you become the healer of your lineage. Any ways in which those energies from or programming from that line has been stopping you in your life, I choose to let that go. Let yourself yawn if you want to, like a couple of people are doing. Some of you might start to feel lighter. And anywhere where that programming or energy has been inhibiting you or restricting you from moving forward, there's no longer any need to fight with it, resist it. Once you see what it is, often they return to sender. If you're getting any physical symptoms, feel free to stretch or to release. The suggestion, I would say, is not to contract, but feel free to move your body and let it loosen and release from your body. And you don't have to do it all now, so you can set an intention that this starts now, but over the next 3 or 4 nights, for some of the time when you're sleeping, that you'll be releasing the lineage limitations that you took on from your father's line. Any mistaken idea that you need to save them, because children try to save their parents. And you can put people in that line, your father, back in touch with his own higher wisdom, intelligence, and let him live his life. And the sole purposes and reasons that he needs to solve are his to solve, and yours are yours to solve. And then, as we said, letting that continue. move over to your mother's line now. And get really curious when I say move over to your mother's line, what images come to mind, what body sensations change. Get fascinated by the fact that we have this wonderful instrument of a human body that you're learning to take charge of, navigate, and be a compassionate leader of and with and as. And then on your mother's line, noticing anything from her, sending back any obligations with compassion, any agreements, especially agreements that you might have unconsciously made. Your competing commitments. Let her know that you want to live your dharma and your path in life, and this allows her to live hers too. And then moving to her parents and siblings. And then back one more generation on the mother's side. And start to realize there's a part of you that's wise and knows how to do this, that works in pattern. And then as that clears, come back to noticing your center line, your presence, how much more space you have for yourself. And start to fill that up with your own intelligence, your own wisdom, your own compassion. And realize you can have your own feelings. We get overwhelmed when we try and experience the energy of other people's feelings. But actually, when we have our own feelings, have you ever felt strong when you felt angry? Have you ever felt a beautiful melancholy when you feel sad? When you're having your own feeling, there's something quite exquisite about it, about all human emotions and feelings and body sensations. And when you have your own, you don't have to be afraid of them, you don't have to be scared of them, you don't have to resist them. You can have your feelings rather than them having you. Okay? And now anything else that's available, we'll just take the opportunity, any karma, any contracts, we don't need to know what those are, I'll just throw those in the mix in case some of those can drop and let go. And your test is your what's called your phenomenology, whether your body responds, then you know a shift is happening, regardless of the narrative or the story. Okay, and take a deep breath. And very gently notice that your state has changed, because I want to talk a little bit about altered states before we close. And then rather than kind of zipping back, travel the journey back to your ordinary open eyes waking state slowly. So you set an intention, feel your fingers and toes, stepping back. And you can imagine sending out memos to all the people that you know, letting them know that you've changed, especially pets, otherwise they'll look at you quizzically and go, You look familiar, but I'm not quite sure who you are. So just letting the pets know that your energy is changing and has changed. And if you yawn, that's okay. That's the body resetting and releasing tension, and also releasing energy. Okay, and coming back. So just take a breath for a moment, put your feet on the ground. And notice just in coming up to an hour, just the felt sense of any subtle physiological changes, you know, feeling lighter, feeling freer. Because part of the practice is that we're essentially training, there's two things happening. One is we're training states, so the ability to be able to more and more easily go into these states on a regular basis. And the other is that sometimes when you go into these states, you get a permanent repatterning, old conditioning, programming drops away, the energies of it, if you believe in such things. And those things never come back, right? And so what happens then over the days to come is that if one of those kind of stuck places has kind of opened and released, the rest of your system then reorganizes all of its meanings around the new way of being. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to goals. So who here has any goals that they want to achieve? Especially around love and money, I guess, right? Okay. Now, I think of goals very differently to how most people think about goals, right? So if you have a goal, you have an outcome, right? Somewhere you're intending to go towards, right? Now, if you get that goal, then you feel good, right? If you don't get it, then you don't feel good. Is that right? Is that pretty much right? Okay. Now, when you have a goal, then you have a direction, right? You have an outcome, something you're moving towards. And on the way to that goal, you have life experience. Right? And when you have that life experience, some of it is great, some of it's not so great, right? But when you have these tools to release anything on the way to the goal, one of two things happen. Either the goal happens a lot quicker, or you find you can take the actions a lot quicker. And I'll separate those out in a second. Or you find out that that wasn't your authentic goal. And here's why, because a lot of goals are made in compensation to not wanting to feel a certain way, right? They're not kind of like, I'm here, I'm present. What do I want to do now? That kind of thing, right? They're more like, I never want to be poor, or as an example, I'm thinking of someone I know. And therefore that's driven this person to become very wealthy. But it's still in compensation. It's still living life of, I don't want to be poor. Does that make sense? Right? Rather than here we are on this planet having this experience, and we can explore different avenues and directions of what we want to experience. And the way we do that is we set a goal, and what that does is it organizes our behavior towards an outcome, right? And then we get to engage with the world. And to me, the engage with the world bit, that is your life. So as you sincerely engage with your life day to day and everything that's coming up for you, that is the experience of your life. Right? And to me, that is the purpose of a goal. It sets a direction, right? And therefore it takes it away from a black and white, do I get my goal or not, to, depending on which goal I set, what direction am I going in? Does that make sense? What am I going to experience with all the choices that I'm having? All right. So I put a few things up. Forgive me for these being the least interesting slides. However, okay. So a few different things. Right. So whether your goal is going to manifest or not, to me, it's whether your internal energetic alignment is congruent, right? Because in the final stages of kind of realization, spiritual realization, is that there's no outside. This world is a reflection of our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, karma, history, backgrounds, right? And it's not that that's true, but it's possible to have an experience where you recognize or realize that your nervous system is constructing your experience moment to moment to moment to moment without exception, right? It always bothered me that, they tell you that, that lamp or that book over there is being constructed inside your head, but it really doesn't feel like it's in your head, does it? It feels like it's over there. Like, how does it get back outside, right? Unless this is your mind, actually, is what you're experiencing, is the construction of your nervous system. It's a 3D, in that sense, holographic, fully rendered experience, right? Is what your nervous system is generating, right? So the narrative that it's happening inside your head is true in the sense that if you stop that happening, then experience disappears. But that's more of a correlation. It doesn't actually match your direct experience of existence, which is stuff seems like it's on the outside. So how is your nervous system then putting it there, right? Where does experience feel like it is? Feels like it's over there, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. So if you take that premise, then when you get these internal alignments, the world starts showing up in different ways for two reasons. One is there's some mystical, magical element, but the other is because you are literally rendering it differently through the lenses you're looking through. And because of the lenses you're looking through, new opportunities become possible, new behaviors become possible, and you start acting in new and different ways, right? And therefore, those two components together, people move towards love and money in their life. And if you take this approach, which is what's in the way is the way, right? And every day you sincerely release the kind of the resistances and the blockages coming out, then you're gaining freedom more and more. You're utilizing your experience, I think, in the most effective way you can use it, right? Now, outer clarity is what we really want, the outcome, what we see in, hear, and feel. Often people have an idea of an outcome, but you say, well, what would a movie camera see if you actually had that outcome? They can't tell you, right? And so making tangible the experience that you would like to have, one of the reasons people don't do it is if they do it too vividly, it brings up feelings and emotions they don't want, because it conflicts with certain beliefs they might have, like, I don't deserve this, or I shouldn't have this, or it can't happen for me, all those kind of things. That's why you need these tools to release through those feelings that come up. Because if you can't really make a vivid imagination of your outcome, right, doesn't mean that that's the outcome that's going to come, but it's the felt sense of that's what you're looking for, then it's very hard to get there, right? Now, here's a key one, which is why we did a lot of what we did today. Many people are playing out other people's goals and outcomes. My father wanted me to be a lawyer, that kind of thing, right? Was never my own goal. So as you release more and more this programming and conditioning, what it starts to feel like is the reality you're living into is real-time appearing from your own goals and desires. It's like the gap between you and the world kind of starts to disappear. It's like a bit like in a computer game, you're stepping into the next rendered moment and the next rendered moment and the next rendered moment, always afresh. Never step in the same river twice, that kind of feeling. Okay. Key element is letting go of the how. What's actually important about the goal. So often people will go for a goal and they conflate that with how they want to get it. So somebody wants to relax, so they smoke cigarettes because they don't really want to smoke cigarettes. They want to feel relaxed. But the how is a very dysfunctional way of getting there, right? So if you think about your outcome for love and money, think about the conditions that you currently have in place of what you think needs to happen or needs to be done to get there, right? And if they're coming out of your current body, mind, energy system, then what's happening is we're limiting the creativity of get there. Okay. And what I mentioned at the beginning, goals set up a direction or a trajectory, which I think is more important than the outcome, because outcomes are unpredictable. However, you engaging with your life is entirely predictable. Every night you go to bed and go, I engaged with my life well today, is a good day, right? And that's entirely within your control. Okay. Now, attempting or achieving goals can also invoke meanings that are much more important than the outcome. So often a goal is actually a ritual that has a meaning attached to it. So let's say I'm afraid of public speaking, and I go and I do a public speaking course, and now I'm comfortable with public speaking. Often for people, that the meaning that changes for them can ripple through in other areas of their life, right? So think about picking goals, not just for the outcome of that goal, but what it means to you. Right? And what I said before, what you achieve on the way to your goal can be much more important than the outcome. So as I've been doing these 3 sessions, there's been a lot of wobbles and glitches and changes and shifts and things. And I treat that as one of the primary functions of this process, right? I get to grow, right? If it all went perfectly and smoothly, I wouldn't grow. If you went to the gym and you're trying to lift weights and get stronger, and someone came along and they kept stealing the weights off you, said, let me help you, and they just took away all the weights, you wouldn't grow. Right? That wouldn't work very well. Plus your life would be a bit dull, I think. Okay, now this is a strange one, which is the paradox of the more neutral you are about your goal, like the more okay you are whether you get it or not, right? That moves you forward in your spiritual development, because attaching to a goal is taking some of your consciousness and your attention and binding it to an outcome, right? And now the stakes are high for you about whether you get that outcome or not. That attention, that awareness is not liberated, it's not free to move fluidly. So this actually moves you forward, because the less you're identified in a kind of rigid, attached way to the physical world, and it's a tricky one because it doesn't mean dissociated, the more free you are to have your experience of life and enjoy all of it. The highs, the lows, the goods, the bads, everything. And there's also this odd one, which is getting the balance right between you, the universe, and surrender and intention. What I mean by that is some people have just yanged their way through life, like sheer bloody mindedness, right? Other people are, let it flow, man, just whatever happens, happens, right? And you kind of need to get this edge right between the two. Right? It's like if you've got a dance partner and they're kind of dominatingly leading, that's not going to work. But equally, if you're just flopping and not kind of following, and I had an ex-girlfriend, she was a cello teacher, and she said with the bow, it's not too light, not too tight, not too loose. Or in the spiritual terms, you got a bird in your hand. Why you're holding a bird, I don't know, but not too tight or you'll kill it, and not too loose or it'll fly away. But why you'd want to contain it, I don't know. But anyway, that is the story. All right. So think about this now, right? Which is that, why do you have goals? Right? Having heard this and just thinking beyond, the most obvious reason is because I want the goal, right? Why else could you want goals? What are the reasons? For growth, helping you focus.
You want to be in a better place.
Clarity, direction, purpose, new experiences and growth. Some level of dissatisfaction with the current reality. Greater good of the group, absolutely. So the point is this: if you have a single lens onto reality, which is, I want to get my goal, right? Then you're set up for achievement or disappointment. that make sense? Right. But if you add lenses and there isn't a limit, see in the physical world, you can only kind of have one, if I'm looking from here, then I'm not looking over there, right? But actually in the mind, we can look in multiple ways simultaneously. So think about if you have the outcome for your goal is to grow, right? Then you've decoupled from, do I get my goal or not? Does that make sense? Right? Because even if you don't get the goal, you can go, well, I got the growth, right? If it's fascination and interest, then you can go, even if I didn't get the goal, it was fascinating going on the journey, right? So the more you can set up more perspectives and reasons why you're doing something, you're not limited to one, the freer you are to be able to glean benefit from reality. Is that making sense? Right? Yeah. Because this is the challenge, that when we were young, the way our minds make meaning is that if either I get my goal or no map, like off the edge of the abyss, right? And therefore people get anxious, they get terrified if they don't get the outcomes they want in life. The minute you have a backup plan, right, which is if I don't get my goal, I'll still be okay, right? Then a lot of anxiety drops away, a lot of fear drops away. An example for this is somebody gets, let's say they're doing sales, right? And they get a discovery call and now they've got a potential client, right? Before they had the potential client, they were perfectly fine, like going along in life. Now they've done the call and the person hasn't called back in 2 days. Now they feel awful. They're actually in no different position than they were a day before they got, the call in the first place, right? Right. But the mind is constructing the polarity of, if I get the goal, it's going to be fantastic. If I don't get the goal, it's going to be awful. Is this making sense? Because we're going to do a process on this in a second. Yeah. All right. So think of a goal or an outcome that you have where there's a big difference between getting it versus not getting it. That you've made a huge difference. Like getting it is, I've got to have it, got to get it. If I didn't get it, I'll be disappointed, devastated. Can't even contemplate not having it. Just let me know that you've got one of those. Yeah? Everyone? Yes? All right. So now measure the polarity, like the difference between those two, right? So 9 or 10 is, I can't even contemplate not having this outcome, right? And 0 is, yeah, okay, life will go on. It's okay. I'll live and learn, right? And where are you on that scale right now? 7, 8, 5, 6, 7, 7, 8, 8, 5. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to do. Right. We're going to use a method from a guy called Zivorad Slavinsky, no longer alive, sadly. Or maybe not. Maybe he's having a whale of a time. We don't know. So take 2 fingers and put them on here on the bridge of the nose, where the eyebrow meets the bridge of the nose. And now vividly imagine having your goal and wanting it and insisting on it, and all of the side of having the goal. Feel those feelings, exaggerate them, get them as most as you can, and then take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Make it nice and vivid, the side of having the goal, getting the goal, wanting the goal, and having to have the goal. And then relax that side, and then go to the other side. And then 2 fingers just where the eyebrow meets the bridge of the nose. And then just for this moment, be willing to feel the feeling you would have if you didn't get that goal. Just keep breathing. Allow it to be here, exaggerate the feeling. And when you get it at its most, take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, and then back to the other side. And think about the clinging, the wanting the goal, having to have this goal, this outcome. And then when you get it at its most, deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then one more, back to the other side. And feeling of not having the goal or the outcome. Feel that feeling. Then take a breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, and just kind of brush over the top of the head and off the shoulders. And move your shoulders, take a breath. And then now tune in and see if that kind of polarity, that opposite, what it is now. And then just put in the chat what you had before, and then, an arrow or, a 7 to a 2, a 6 to a 3, any, whatever the change is. Okay, 5 to a 3, 8 to a 4, 5 to 3, 2 to 1, 7 to a 4, 8 to a 5, 7 to a 5. All right, we're going to do another process, because I want to bring this down. You see what happens when you bring the charge down on these kinds of polarities. Okay, we'll just go back to havening, which is just stroking down the outside of the arms. So just feel that feeling of the having a big difference between the two. So I've got to have this goal. I can't not have this goal. The attaching to the outcome and the resistance or the avoiding of not having the outcome. Here you go. Okay, and then relax. And then put it into the chart what the third number is, so you can see the sequence that everyone's got. Five, 3, 1, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 8, 4, 2, okay, 8, 5, 4, 7, 4, 1. Okay, let me just do a round of tapping and just go through a few different things. It's a bit of review. Tap on the left side of your hand. And just feel that feeling of, I've got to have this. Can't not have this. Okay, and then tap here. Feel that polarity. How much you're invested in wanting one side more than another. Deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And then you can just put the start number and the end number, actually, what you are at now. Uh, 8 to a 2, 8 to a 3, 7 to a 4. I don't want to keep the number. No, exactly. You want to, what you'll start to notice is, well, we'll ask in a couple of minutes, but 6 to a 1, 6 to a 2, 7 to a 1, 8 to a 2. All right, we're going to do one more. So put your head absolutely straight like this, and then you're going to move your eyes to the left, eyes to the right, like this. So keeping your head still. Breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth. Here you go. And then diagonal, top right, bottom left. Then top left, bottom right. Okay, that'll do. Deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I'll show you one more before we put the numbers in. Just grab something that you can throw from hand to hand. It's called bilateral stimulation. preferably not $1,000 iPhone. Okay, so now tune into whatever's left in that polarity of, you know, strongly preferring one side to the other, or probably not as strong anymore, and just feel that feeling. And then the thing you're throwing kind of goes, you can see that the hand that's left behind stays in the middle. It's very rhythmic. And what's happening is your attention is actually going from left to right, which kind of balances the hemispheres. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere, left hemisphere, right hemisphere. Okay, and then take a deep breath. Right. And now from this state, as we've been doing before, go back and think about that polarity now and see how much more kind of, my life doesn't depend on it kind of thing. And just put in the chat where you were at the beginning and where you are now. 8 to a 2, 8 to a 0, 7 to a 3, 7, 5 to a 1, 7 to a 0, 7 to a 1. Right. Now, excellent. Right. 8 to 8 to 0, 8 to 3. So 8 to a 4, 4 to a 0. I don't feel number, but I feel energized. Excellent. Okay. Now, here's the point. Previously, it seemed like a choice that you wanted that goal, right? But it was actually a compulsion. Does that make sense? Right? Because you couldn't not have it because you would have felt awful. But now, how many people are in a more ho-hum, I could take it or leave it? Yeah, it's a bonus. It would add to my life. Right? This is what we're trying to get to, where your basic way of being in the world is fine, is perfect. I shouldn't use the word fine. It's perfect. It's okay. You feel good, right? And now we can talk about, and now what would be interesting to add to it, right? Does that make sense to people? Yeah. And the paradox of all of this, because actually what's happening is we're also taking away the second order response. So what that means is, let's say if someone feels sad, right? Then it's just sad, right? But now if they feel angry about being sad, or they feel sad about feeling sad, and we get into these loops, then we start to get it, you know, it starts to bind up our attention and our energy, right? So we are freeing ourselves from all of the second order suffering that goes on, that we add to situations. Events are just events until we start adding meaning to it, right? I still want it, but I won't die without it. Exactly. Yeah. Can you feel the freedom in that? Right. And often what can happen is when we do this, if the compulsion, what I talked about, a compensatory behavior, if the goal is because you feel like you have no option but to have that goal because otherwise you'd feel terrible, when you clear up the terrible, you realize you didn't want that goal in the first place anyway, right? It was just an avoidance of wanting to feel terrible, of not wanting to feel terrible. Okay, so we're coming up to time for an hour and a half. Thanks you last time for the guys that indulged me going over like 20 minutes. I'm going to stay with the timing for today. But I just wanted to give you a pointer. We won't actually do this one, but I'll put it on the screen so you have it here. By the way, I missed out number 8. So thank you. Oh, he's gone. But thank you for the guy who, I think it was Robert. Which is clarify and take the action steps that will get you there easily and enjoyably as possible. So once you've clarified your outcome, right, and cleared up the emotions around that, then you clarify the steps to get there, and they can have emotions associated with them. And it's what I was saying earlier, which is clean up the resistance, the reluctance to doing those steps, and then you end up the steps are just the steps to take, right? And I'll put this up. We won't go through it. But in terms of taking action in the world, what you want to do is take the smallest example of that habit for 30 days. So the way Ken Wilber puts this is, if you want to learn to meditate, don't learn to meditate in the next month, right? 20 minutes twice a day. That's not what you want to learn. You want to learn to sit down to meditate, right? And so therefore, sitting down to meditate for 1 minute fulfills a requirement, which is it's the smallest example of a habit for 30 days. I'm not sharing my screen, am I? Right. So you're not learning to meditate, you're learning to sit down to meditate. That's what you're wiring in. That's the new habit, right? And then that is what will build the habit much more easily, right? Because our brains learn by patterns, a bit like the door example, right? Do your very best to do it for 30 days. If you miss a day, no big deal, right? Just do it the next day, right? It really doesn't matter. You haven't failed, nothing's stopped, the world hasn't ended, just start again. If your resistance or emotions come up, use the emotional regulation tools. I like to say that the journey to the beginning is half the work, right? Because if you haven't, how many people here haven't started something for ages that they keep meaning to do? Yeah. Okay. Now, the work isn't to do the thing. The work is to get from here to the start of the thing. And that journey is all of this, releasing all these emotions and things. And you don't know how much freedom you're going to generate just by getting to the beginning, right? So you can thank that goal, even if you never do it, of just getting to the start of it, or clearing up emotions and thoughts and feelings, right? And here's a very key principle, which is that no habit is too small, right? Because you're actually getting good at the habit of implementing habits. So just pick a small habit that you that might not actually be a significant one that you actually want the outcome for, right? But you're just learning to get the identity of someone who can implement habits, right? This is a tricky one for most people because it's the highest leverage thing you can do, and it's the trickiest one to get people to do, right? Because of that thing of if something's too small, we feel it's futile, right? But actually, if you built the habit every day of something really simple, let's say you not checking Facebook daily, of putting a key on a hook, right, rather than just like throwing it down on the table as you come in, right? That you're building the habit of building a habit, right? So my friend Brad, he read, is a whole different thing, but Atomic Habits has this link to identity, and he made his bed for 7 days, and he'd always, like 20 years, he'd been like a disorganized, not very disciplined person. And for some reason with him, making a bed for 7 days just generalized all into the rest of his life. And he ended up doing all his taxes on time, was never late to pick up his kids again. For some reason so you can never really know how much a small habit can influence you. And here's why, is because we're experiencing the world, but the experience we're having is only the one that's being represented back to us by our consciousness, right? But right now, your left toe was having an experience until I mentioned it, right? And now it's in your conscious awareness, right? But it was carrying on and experiencing, and it would have let you know if it got bitten or you stepped on something. But until then, so we're having like a huge amount of experience that's not being represented back to us. Right. So if you go and do some small habits where you go, I've got an intuition that might work, but it probably won't, right? Even if you have that kind of attitude, it's worth doing because some of these can really ripple through. And actually, when you get really attuned to your own energy system, you start coming up with things like this. I don't know why this was work, but for some reason, if I I'm trying to think of a recent example. It was an audio file. I was doing something. I was thinking, I don't know why, but if I clean up this audio file, it's going to do something. Right? It was a really kind of silly idea. And so I cleaned up the noise on this audio file. Right? And the next day, for about 6 hours, my mind was so silent. Right? Now, who can predict that? That's not predictable. Right? But somehow, some part of my brain, if you clean up this audio file and get rid of the noise, then some part of me kind of knew what to do with that, right? Okay, so let's wrap up. Put your feet on the ground. And because you'll have the recordings in the last 3 sessions, in these 3 sessions, I've introduced you to some new ideas, hopefully some new ideas, and an approach to change, which is to apply emotional regulation tools and techniques to common human experiences and the physiological component of how you've been doing them in the world, as a very high leverage move in order to be able to get shifts and changes in your life in elegant and easy ways. And a part of you has been learning consciously. And we know, because we don't represent the whole world back to ourselves, other things have been happening. Your unconscious has been making associations. Your energy system has been responding to being in this field, this group consciousness. You came into this program with some intentions, and you did some energy clearing along the lines of clearing up the pathway to the outcomes that you want manifest in your life right now. And as you continue to learn and play and to grow, and what you can see is that this more direct approach to change can be fun, can be easy, and as you've seen in the chat, can be predictable. You're seeing physiological responses that we can actually influence directly and measure and see that they've changed. And over a period of time, it is like fitness. It's like physical fitness. Our nervous system gets the pathway out of suffering and into freedom and ease and flow. So with that in mind, wiggle your fingers and toes, a yawn and a stretch. Take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And I do want to take a minute to let you know what's coming up. I did tell you there'd be no sales, so there's hardly any sales. This will take like a minute or two and 1 slide, and then you can go and get the information and look at it whenever you want. I hope I've earned that right. So a couple of options, and I've made it super easy. A completely no risk option, 0 risk option. So let me just share my screen. Okay. So as of August, starting next Thursday, I plan to do these sessions. They'll be a little bit different to how we've been doing these 3, because there'll be much more interaction, laser coaching. And the nice thing about this approach is you do not have to share content, right? You can literally, the other day, I think you saw somebody was kind of agitated and was just rub here, took a couple of fingers there, and you could see the shift, and experience it immediately. So we can do laser coaching without content and Q&A. So it's 8 hours of training, laser coaching and Q&A per month, so 297. First option for you is if you can see the value in this and how quickly you can kind of move forward through some of these challenges and the kind of content that we're doing, then you can join at this link. I'll put it in the chat in a second. There'll be live sessions exactly like this, membership area, recordings. I'll throw some bonuses in there as well. And if you're ready, come to the live sessions, dive in, and this is like a regular practice. So 2 hours a week, 8 hours a month, and we'll take the 5th. If there's a 5th Thursday, we'll take that off, right? And if you join, I won't do if you join today, but if you join in the next few days, by the end of the month, let's say, then you get $100 off the first month. Your second option, if you don't know me that well, you don't know this work, you're still hesitating, still thinking about it, which is totally 100% fine, then I've got a risk-free trial. So this one also comes with a money-back guarantee. I don't want to keep people's money if they're not happy. But you pay absolutely nothing to begin with, right? Just go and sign up at this link, and I'll send you all the Zoom links for August. And then towards the end of August, if you want to continue, if you've seen the value that you're getting during the month, then I'll send you a link, and then you pay for August and then onwards, right? But you get to decide later. A little bit of an incentive if you decide by the middle of the month, after we've done a couple of sessions, and you join by the middle of the month, then you'll get $50 off that first month, right? So at these two sites, there is a free healing and clearing session from when Annie and I did the original healing and clearing. So that's option 1. And that's on there directly. You don't have to sign up or do anything. It's right there for you. All the details are there. There's, why should you join this course? But my belief is that the program is the marketing, right? You come and experience it, and if you feel like this is working for you, and the trade, which is the shifts and changes I'm getting, are easily worth it, then I want to join up. These are the people I want, because then you form a group energy and a group collective that are in and want to make these kinds of shifts and changes with this kind of work. So that there endeth the sales piece. Go and check it out. Actually, I'll tell you what, I'm just quickly going to do. I can get the whole thing in there, and then we'll have a 5-minute break, and then we'll do laser coaching and Q&A. Now, I didn't say it last time. We really can do things without content. You don't have to share content, because the minute you start to think about the thing, you're literally animating that body, mind, energy system in the moment, and then we can work with it directly. Yeah. Okie doke. So I will see you guys let's get back together at 1:45, and then we'll go for half an hour, depending on what people need. But thank you guys. Thank you for showing up, bringing your energy, your attention, your sincerity, and doing this kind of work. And also, for the free thing, is completely free to try. So if you want to share that with others, please feel free to. Okay. So I'll see you at 1:45, and we'll do some laser coaching. All right. Bye for now.